Tried to go live a few minutes ago. We were just testing out the sound, but this is the real deal. So I'm very excited to have Claudia and Juliette here today, and from Australian podcast. And I found them through Sology, which I mention just about every single time I go live on this channel because I have met so many people from Sology in person and through the internet. And lots of them I bring on as guests. So thank you, Claudette and Juliette, both for being here.
Wow. Thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, we're happy to be here.
Yeah.
And for the viewer, it says Claudia and Juliette, but it says Claudia. Let's see, how can I describe this? Juliette is the daughter and Claudia is the mother.
Yes.
It says Juliette closer to where.
Yes.
Oh yeah, it's opposite.
Juliette is daughter.
Yeah.
Okay. So also if you're watching this now or on the replay, Claudia and Julia. Claudia and Juliette, rather. They can be found on Spotify under Witch Bitch and on YouTube under She's of Love, and also on Facebook under She's of Love. And it says all that in the description box, including links. So if you're wondering how to find them in the future, that's how you find them. And you can also read what I just said on the ticker tape if that didn't make sense to you.
Awesome.
So, gosh, I have so many questions. I thought about this. So some of our viewers may or may not know, we tried to go live a while ago and Spirit said, now is not the time. We're not going to let this happen. And so now is the time, and it's all happening.
Yeah.
And so, I already had some time to think about questions then, and then I've thought about questions again today. My first question is probably a very popular question with the many people who have you on their shows, and that is, when did you think of doing a podcast together, and what was the inspiration?
Well, should I answer this one?
Yeah.
So
it was Juliette.
So we had just been on Soulology with Todd Medina, and I loved his style of video. I think he was someone who I had turned to a lot during my awakening and during lockdown. Watching his interviews were a really big help to me, and I'm sure many others. And so it kind of
Me too.
Yeah. So he put a call out on his Facebook page. It was either him or Morgan, who's Todd's partner, and like they kind of run it together.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like there was a post on Facebook inviting people to like reach out if they wanted to come on. And I was very interested and I wanted to come on. So I went on the show, and it was a really wonderful experience. And it kind of made me realize how I wanted to do something similar, but in my own way.
With our own flavor.
With our own flavor, exactly.
Yeah.
So I then asked Mum what she thought of it, and it was kind of something we were thinking about for a little bit, and we were tossing around the idea, and then all of a sudden I just asked her straight out, do you want to start this? Do you want to do it right now? Like, do you want to do this? And you said yes. And then we just kind of did it.
I think I was hesitant because not hesitant externally, more it was like a quiet hesitation inside, because I have a fear of public speaking. And I've done some work around it. Like I used to go to Toastmasters here in Australia. We have this thing called Toastmasters where you can practice, and they run it, like a meeting, and you get up and you speak about subjects. And I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoy speaking, and I love talk shows. I grew up watching Oprah. So, and I've always loved her. So yeah, I wanted to do it. Like, I had a motivation to do it and a love of this genre, but I just thought I didn't have the confidence to do it. So doing it with Juliette makes it so much easier and better for me, because we have a vibe and we can vibe off each other, and it's like a bit of a safety net for me. So yeah, and she's incredible. So why wouldn't I want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She is incredible. You're both incredible, but I met her before I met you because Tom
Yes.
interviewed her solo.
Yes.
I want to tie in some overlap that I noticed when you were speaking. So for the viewer, you heard Juliette mention Todd Medina, and Todd Medina is somebody who founded Sology. And Sology, you could say, is really an energy or a realm that came to Todd and asked
Yeah.
to be born through him. And then later, when his wife Morgan came into the picture, because Sology started before they met, then when Morgan came in, she became part of Sology too. And Morgan has her own Facebook page, and she has her own website called zeropointing.com. And she and Todd sometimes will get on the Sology Network, sologynetwork.com. There's also a Sology Facebook page and Sology One Studios YouTube channel. And so Todd and Morgan, as I was saying, they will get on the Sology Network sometimes, and they'll have a session where they go somewhere to an inner plane or another dimension, however you want to think of it. But other than that, Morgan is really in the background as far as her face being shown. Energetically, she's got her stamp all over Sology just as
Yes.
much as Todd. But Todd is really the front man, the face of Sology.
Yeah.
So a little more for the audience about Sology. And I also wanted to say that I found Todd not too long before COVID broke out as well. And I had desire to have a show, also to start writing a blog, and but it just, I guess what I'll say is I already had the desire, but after watching enough Sology, it really catalyzed me, especially as he kept saying over and over, like, anybody who has a desire to do what I'm doing, we need you all to do it.
Yeah.
And I thought, what the heck? So it took me about, well, from the time I had the first desire, it took about 3 years. But from the time that Todd sparked my interest, it took maybe a year or a little more. So it's just interesting that there's that overlap. And I always like to give a nod to Sology because so many things have been born from Sology. Like
Yeah.
us being on here together, you having a show, me having a show, us meeting each other through Sology, et cetera. It's a projects, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's our nod to Sology. Okay, so my next exploration is, and I don't want to sound divisive, and I don't want to sound like I think some people are better than other people, but I think that at this point, exactly where humanity is right now, it's very apparent that there are people who believe hook, line, and sinker what they read in the newspaper, what they hear on the news, um, most things that they were taught in school, etc. And there's a term for those people, and they're called mainstream. and it doesn't make them bad, worse, better than anybody else. We're trying to give language to the two groups that I'm speaking about, right?
Yeah.
So that's mainstream. And then there are people who are not mainstream, and people who are not mainstream are just take everything I said, and there would be the opposite of that. They definitely don't believe everything that they read in a newspaper or a magazine. They may not even own a TV or watch TV. And if they do, they're certainly not listening to much of the news other than maybe just to say, oh, what's the mainstream narrative right now? And we have our own ideas about things, and we have our own ways of knowing, including our intuition and our gnosis that is self-existing within us. And I think we'd like nothing better than to unite and find ourselves all on the same page as the people in the mainstream. Although once you depart from the mainstream, if you ever were part of it, you can't go in that direction. It's like once your eyes have been opened, you can't close them again.
Yeah.
So my question has a few parts, and you can just pick out, how you want to address it. And it's for both of you, so you can each speak on it, separately, because you're two separate people. So I guess what I'm asking is, like, for me, I did have a TV in my home growing up, and yet at the same time, there were so many things about my childhood that were absolutely unconventional, and I also had a really large imagination. So I would say I was never really part of the mainstream. I mean, in some ways, we all are, just by virtue of what we consume and being on the planet and being from a certain culture or whatever. But I think you know what I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
So were either of you ever mainstream? Were your families mainstream? And then also a special little addition about Juliette is when I watched you, Juliette, on Todd's show, is very clear to me. I don't think you were born mainstream at all. I think you were born as somebody who's, because they say, like, each generation is born just a little more awake than the last generation, with some things already in place,
Yeah.
And you, to me, seem like one of those people. Like, your inner knowing appears to be really strong. Your intuition appears to be very strong. Your bullshit meter appears to be working perfectly. And so I want to discuss so I'm sticking a lot in here, and we can parse this out. I'm just kind of unpacking some things for us to think about. Okay. So I would like to hear how that was growing up around mainstream kids, but I would also like to hear from Claudia what it was like to raise a Juliette in the midst of mainstream parents and children. So wherever you want to start, however it comes out, whatever you think of, if you need any direction in the meantime, or if you're forgetting any of the questions. I wasn't very linear with that, but
no,
so okay. We get it.
Well, I think it should start, I guess, like, Mum was pretty mainstream.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, but not in like, she never wanted me to watch the news. So it wasn't about, like, when we think of.
No, I had parts of me that knew.
Yeah,
I had parts of me.
That's what I was gonna say.
Because I wouldn't let her watch.
She would
Disney princesses.
Watching, yeah. But, like, when I say mainstream, in more like the sense of, I mean, being a flight attendant, as Mum was, like, there was a lot of in the training, because you were saying how deeply
I was very corporate
ingrained.
Yes.
But I don't think we ever really lived a mainstream life beyond the point of me being at school. Like, that's kind of the only time where I felt like I was living a mainstream life, and maybe a bit more because when I was a lot younger, we were living in a more bushland area, like a lot of nature. We were living near a river, and so a lot of my time was spent outdoors. But as we moved to the house that we're living in now, when I was probably around 9 years old at that time, I think life did seem a little bit more mainstream because we were living in more suburbia. Like,
we're closer to the city here.
We're closer to the city now. But I never, other than school and maybe where I lived, that was the only things that made my life ever feel like mainstream. Even before we woke up as a family.
Yeah, because my husband's a musician. He's a singer, and he grew up in England, and he has stories of seeing ghosts and little people in the forest. Oh,
yes. I would grow up with these, fantastical stories. And, I asked Dad now. So of course I believed him when I was younger because he was telling these stories about
he believes them.
Yeah. But what I was going to say was, I believed him then, but growing up, I still believed him, but I wanted to know did you make up those stories or was it real? I really want to know, because whatever he said, I still believed in fairies, but I wanted to know if his stories were true. And so he says even to this day that it was true, and that the stories I grew up on, they weren't actually fairy tales, they were real true stories.
And my dad had an element of that kind of magical side of himself as well, because he used to tell the kids stories about fantastical stories, about whales and things like that. So there was definitely an element of magic in Juliette's life growing up, and an element of it in my life growing up too, but nowhere near as much. And so for me, I remember my childhood being a bit of a pressure cooker, because my mum she was a special character, and she and I clashed quite a bit. And so I learned how to entertain myself. My room became my sanctuary. And I remember growing up quite boy crazy. I was really, really boy crazy, and I loved music. And books. I read books constantly. So even though the television was on in my house, and my mum actually was quite addicted to current affairs and the news and magazines and news stories and things that were going on in the world, she was really into all of that. I was into fantasy. I was into romance and love stories and magical stories and things that, not compared to Juliette. She's really into it, but it was an escape for me. It was something that was, it was a useful tool. Whereas Juliette does it, she has her books and her stories because that's something she enjoys. Whereas I would escape into mine. And then I became old enough to start making decisions for myself, and I decided I wanted to travel. And when the opportunity came up to apply to an airline, I was like, great, I can kill two birds with one stone. I'll travel and I'll earn money. And a bonus of all of that was actually the approval of my mother, because she thought that was an amazing job to do. So I was really corporate. I became a little Qantas soldier. And it was my life. It was a lifestyle. My friends, I lost contact with all my childhood friends, and I became friends with a lot of flight attendants. So it transitioned my life in that direction. And then I met my husband, and that all changed again, because he was a musician. And so my life grew again after meeting him. And when I was 26, I found out that I was adopted. And I didn't know that I was adopted. I thought, I grew up thinking that I was my parents' child. And so when I found out that I was adopted, that topsy-turvied me again. Oh, sorry about that.
That's
I
okay.
thought it was on silent. Yeah, so that topsy-turvied me again, and it seems like it's up until recently my life was being buffeted from outside incidences and experiences. And I got to a point where I was like, I don't like this feeling of not being, like, not influencing my life and not being consciously aware of how I'm showing up. And when my dad passed away, Juliette you were about 9 years old, I think, at the time.
I was 11.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry, you
Yeah.
were. She was 11. So she came to me and said, Mum, why did Nonno, because that was what they called him, that's grandfather in Italian, why did Nonno pass away? Why did he have to die from this disease? And through the child's eyes, because she's my child and I love her, and I wanted to answer her the best way I could, I put myself in her shoes and I thought, that's a really good question. Why did he have to die from this disease? And he died from ALS. And in Australia, we call it motor neurone disease.
What is
motor neurone disease?
Oh, yeah. That makes a lot more sense. We should call it that here, too.
Yeah.
I think you call it ALS because it's Lou Gehrig's disease. Is that right? Lou Gehrig's disease?
I just know we call it ALS, but unless you know what ALS is, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't.
Yeah.
You don't know what that is, you know. So that's why the Australian definition our term makes so much more sense. Motor neuron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when that happened, I mean, and I think that experience in my life, losing my dad, was the catalyst for the change that happened to come. And so when Juliette asked me that question, I went deep and I thought, yes, why did it have to happen? And I realized it's because people are very aware of diseases like cancer and things like that, but not many people were aware of motor neurone disease in Australia, even though over the last 20 years, and actually it's probably more like 30 years now, it has, the disease has risen by 200% in this country. Yeah, which is probably more now because my dad died in 2014. So back then it was 200%. So now I can imagine it would be like something like 220% maybe, which is incredible. And so that started us on this journey of finding out why we don't fundraise for it here, why people aren't aware of it, and that sort of thing. And then Juliette said to me through all of this, I want to raise money, Mum. I want to do something to change this outcome for other people, because she saw how devastated I was from losing my dad. And of course, she was devastated too. So then that started us on this journey of fundraising, and she started a lemonade stand, and it got a lot of traction here in Australia. She was on television. She met some famous people through it. We had NRL players whose father passed away of the same thing supporting her. And then through that, we started to go to an entrepreneur school here in Sydney to learn how to build the business and create something bigger than ourselves. And then through that, we met some people, and then through those people, we met more people. And that is how our world expanded. And then because it was my father had passed and I had some spiritual things happen to me, he came to me, he spoke to me, things that had never happened to me in my life before. It opened my mind to this realm of spirituality. And so that started me on the path of spirituality. Then 2020 comes COVID hits, and the rest of it is just like it just blew open. I was feeling frustration and anger and all sorts of stuff. And my friend said to me, you need to go and get it out of your system. And I was like, how do I do that? And she said, go to the ocean and scream into the ocean. Just scream out into the ether. And so I took Juliette with me, went to this place where I knew it was not very populated and there was a cliff face there, so I could do it. And Juliette was scared. She was scared. She's like, what are you doing, Mum? And I was like, I'm going to get out my frustration. And so I went to the edge of the cliff and I just screamed everything out of my body. And then I felt empty. I was clean of all that frustration and it felt so good. It was like, oh, I needed to do that. And then from there, all this information downloaded into me. All this spiritual information, like about veganism, about polarity, about just all this knowledge and knowing, and my cells were tingling, and I can't even now talking about it, I'm getting goosebumps. And I rushed back home and I rang my friend and I said, oh my goodness, this is what's happened. This is all downloaded into me and I can't believe it. And she was already awake. She already knew all of this stuff. And so when I was spewing all this stuff out at her, she kind of had this internal smile of, finally, finally you've woken up, finally you understand. And then it was a process after that of bits and pieces, and then realizing, why the world is the way that it is, why things seem upside down, because growing up in the 80s and then getting into the 2000s, I had this feeling of something being very wrong in the world and not knowing. I could never put my finger on it because I saw the way society had changed and values were changing. The way companies were being run was changing. From the moment I started at Qantas to when I left Qantas, I saw the transition and the decision-making, and wondering why things were being decided the way they were, how money was being transferred from the pockets of the workers to the pockets of the CEOs and things like that. And I was like, wow, this is huge. And it was all coming from the government. It was all these rules and regulations were being opened up because of the government. And so these CEOs were able to do what they were doing. And this was all during my time.
Yeah, we learned. So like when we were doing the entrepreneur school, it was like a building of knowledge for this time right now in our lives, because we learned all about the backwards way that the system is run, and
the hustle culture
and the
all
hustle
of that.
culture and the loopholes that you can get financially and things like that. We learned so much.
Yeah.
So it was a big building foundation for being awake and understanding, like it. When you understand the loopholes in the system, you then understand a lot more when you wake up to the system as well. And yeah, so that was a really big thing. I also wanted to touch on, because I just remembered while you were speaking, Mum, about like what it was like growing up, because I believe you asked this, Julie, like what it was like being in
the mainstream.
In the mainstream, like growing up when it felt like I wasn't part of the mainstream. Because
it was very isolating, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, not really. Growing up, I never had an issue finding joy in life. Like as a kid, that's kind of a big theme for every child. I mean, I would always find friends, and I was a big dancer, so I loved to dance and move my body, and I really believed in fairies, and I was obsessed with fairies growing up. And so I would always like find ways to merge the worlds together.
Yeah, Juliette's
And-
really good at that.
And so, yeah, I never, like, when I was really young, I never had an issue with anything feeling different or anything like that. I didn't care. It was just like, this is me, and I always figured out how to make my life really happy being different, and I just never cared if I was different.
It wasn't till you turned
It was
teenager.
Yeah. But even before that, like, a big thing for me was while I was running my lemonade stand, because it got a lot of traction, a lot of people found out about it at my school. There was even one morning when I was in I was in the local newspaper, and some kid kept it and brought it to school and showed me, and it was actually, it was really weird because the kid that showed me, he was actually like kind of an asshole to me. He wasn't a very nice kid usually. And I don't know, it was the first time during during high school, this lemonade stand was a bit of a sore spot for me because it was a moment where people would have their attention on me that I didn't want attention from, because the people weren't very nice to me usually. And sometimes it was even a point of bullying or like making fun of me. And then other times it would have been like, that morning when he showed me the newspaper, other times it would be like a sense of curiosity. And so it kind of, people like to put labels. I mean, especially when you're that age, you're trying to understand life. There's a lot of labels put on. And I was just kind of seen as a bit of I don't know how to explain it, but people thought I was very rigid because I was like I had a business, and it was like, yeah, I don't know, people,
a goody two shoes.
Yeah, rigid and just not fun, and maybe a bit stern because, yeah, I don't know, they just like to put meanings and things on me. So that was like the first time where I was kind of I was a target for bullying and for like being made fun of or being put down for being different. That was the first time, because ever since, like, before that, I was just kind of friends with everyone, and I had a lot of fun no matter who
She was
my
normal.
friends. Yeah, well,
In their
eyes, yeah. So when this was all going down, it was really a really difficult experience because it was just everyone kind of turned. I mean, it's when someone gets attention, like in any situation, it's going to happen. Like, people aren't going to like the fact that attention is on something external. Like, it brings up triggers. Whenever there's a spotlight on someone, it's going to be a mirror to people.
Particularly in Australia, we have this thing we call a tall poppy syndrome. And if your head sticks up above the crowd, they chop it off.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's not like, I mean, I think in America, people who are trying to get ahead or who are in the spotlight are celebrated. Whereas we have a very different view of anybody who gets attention. It's like, oh, you think you're better than everybody else because it's like frowned upon if you're different or if you're, because Juliette wasn't trying. She was just being herself. Like, she wasn't trying to get into the newspaper. Something tragic happened in our family, and she wanted to do something to change the world. That was her view. She didn't see anything wrong with that. And that's what people, older generations, could see in her, and they were like, wow, this kid is like newsworthy. We want to put her on the front page or whatever. And the kids at school saw that as her trying to be better than them. And they were like, well,
Yeah.
We're going to bring you down a peg or two. You're not going to think that you're better than any of us. And that wasn't where she was coming from at all. She was just, it was just circumstance, and then she made the best of it.
Yeah. And that energy that was given to me by everyone, because it wasn't just one or two people. That
it was everyone.
It was honestly, it was everyone that I talked with, even my own friends. I had issues with because around this topic. And when everyone sees you in this light as someone who is maybe it's so strange because it's so opposite, but of someone who's selfish or self-conceited, like that was kind of the energy that they placed on me with
They
their
projected
insults
it,
and
yeah.
stuff. And being that age, that's kind of what I became their vision of me, like, because became defensive, and I would jab back. Like whenever someone was mean to me, I gave that energy back. I would yell back, or I would be, return to sender, but I'm the one. I'm not just holding up the mirror, I'm also throwing daggers,
Yeah.
And I became really angry, and I definitely lost a lot of myself in high school because of this. And yeah, people just, I basically turned into what they were saying, at least in their eyes. I was giving them fuel to be right. I was making them be right in their words and stuff. Now, I was never like I was never self-conceited or anything like that.
No,
but to
and it was only, you were only firing shots back when they were firing at you.
Yeah, I just became really angry, and
you were reactionary because you were trying to protect yourself.
Yeah. And to them, to their eyes, that was me being what they were saying I was being. And to be honest, like even in my own eyes, that's what it was too. So
became like a well, we can't say self-fulfilling prophecy because it was their prophecy, not yours, but it just goes to show how the collective affects the individual, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Like that was even like in that situation, everybody involved, you and them, were a product of acculturation.
Yes.
Because of this, what you call the tall poppy syndrome, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know. Too bad you couldn't have just been seen as like the bodhisattva entrepreneur,
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's kind of tragic. So what did you learn from that?
I'm still learning a lot from that.
Me too.
So I actually left school. In Australia, you can leave school in grade 10. And that's like legal and everything. So I actually left school when I was 15. I left high school and I went into TAFE, which is like a college. And so my life has, from there, it's been like a really powerful journey of learning that I'm at the steering wheel. I'm in control of everything. I get to take my life where I want it to go. And I also have the power to do that because, it's one thing accepting that you're the one steering the ship, but then also believing that you can take yourself to where you want to go is another thing entirely. So that's kind of what I'm learning still. But from high school, I guess the lesson that I've learned from that is that you really just can't care what other people think. You can't waste energy on changing yourself for other people or even just reacting to other people and what they say about you. The only time when the energy should be spent is on loving relationships, whether that's with building friendships, building trust in other people, giving compliments to other people, or if someone, like that's where you should spend the energy, not in defending yourself, not in throwing daggers back at people.
Did you ever think to say, like, explain what this was? Like, okay, this happened to my grandfather, made my mother sad. It inspired me to do this. It's actually an act of goodwill. Did you not in defense, but just to give them some information other than what the projection they were holding?
Well,
I know you. I take into account your age too, but I'm just asking. Did it ever
no,
cross your mind?
actually, it didn't.
No, didn't me either.
But looking back, I definitely could have done that. But looking back,
Did you understand it at the time that that's why they were doing it, or did you think it was because of your personality?
Oh,
I didn't understand why, but I think the reason why it was confusing, or maybe the reason why that didn't occur to me, was because the story was like how they heard about it was via
Media.
the story of what happened, because it was the media would share my story as well. Like, you know, that boy showing me the newspaper.
Yeah.
If he read it, he would have known why. Like, so it
So
felt.
You figured the story was already there. You didn't need to tell it.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely looking back, if I was put in a situation like that again, I would deal with it very differently. I think I was just angry because a lot of the outcomes that came from the lemonade stand, you know, being in the news, being in these, you know, having such a big deal made around it is not something that I necessarily wanted. It wasn't.
That's not why she was doing it.
And
occupational hazard, we call that.
Yeah, and it just turned into that. And like anytime I would talk with the news, it would be like, "You're doing such an amazing thing. You're doing such an amazing thing," and that was why I got on the news in the first place. But it was just like, to me, it just felt it's not about doing an amazing thing. It's about raising money for the disease. Like, you know, that's what I wanted.
About her.
That's what I wanted at the end of the day. And I don't I want to say that, like, I'm very grateful for my experience, and I don't want to seem, you know, like ungrateful for my experiences. But yeah, it wasn't about me at all. And then it just became all about me. And so, yeah, I stopped and I couldn't do it anymore. And when I was about 15, I had to let it go, because it was just eating at every single part of my being. And I was really tired as well, because we worked really hard on this project, and it just became my life at every turn, you know, being at school, being out. We would go to events every week. Every weekend I was at market selling the lemonade and actually running the lemonade stand. So there was no escape from it, other than maybe when I was in my bed watching a movie or something like that. Like, that was the only time.
Yeah, I'll be chewing on this for a while in retrospect, when we're not on here anymore, because there's so many interesting dynamics, you know, the acculturation, socialization, the dynamics there, the projection. Also that it didn't occur to anybody. And I think this is also like a sub problem of the tall poppy syndrome, but that it didn't occur to anybody that somebody could want to do good and never even consider recognition.
Yeah.
Which is why she got the recognition.
That is such a blind spot in society, you know, that, and it also kind of tells you something about society. It's like, oh, so in general, it's more common to do something because you would want recognition. I don't know. It's
I think. Sorry,
I
Julie.
just want to recap a few things before I forget. There's already. I wish we could sit down and have a meal together, or go out to tea, or be neighbors for a month or something. But since you've talked, I've already seen so much overlap. So, for instance, I have Italian blood. My grandfather was born in Sicily, and my great grandparents were born in Lago Maggiore in Angera, about 45 minutes north of Milano.
Beautiful.
And so I was thinking about that, and my own relationship with my great grandmother from Italy, Nani, I used to call her, and she used to call me Michichina, which means my little sweet one. And then I was also thinking about there was something else. There's been so much overlap as you're talking. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah, the Italian one is the only thing I can remember. But I had a whole list, but I have nothing to write on. I don't have my phone, so I was trying to remember it, and it didn't work. But there's a lot of overlap. Very interesting in our experiences and our journeys. But I don't want to take away. I'm just saying. I just inserted it there to say that I'm kind of blown away. I mean, I'm not surprised, and I'm surprised all at the same time. You know?
Yeah, because your soul and your subconscious was attracted for a reason.
Yeah.
And why Juliette stood out to you because of the way she was speaking. There was probably messages that were coming through in her body language and because of the way she was raised with an Italian grandfather. There was definitely that Italian culture running through our lives.
Mum's very Italian as well.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. Although my husband is she's Celtic, and my mother was Scottish.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because my one side of the family is Italian, Sicilian, and the other side has a lot of British in it, like English, Irish, Scottish, German, French, and a smidgen of Danish. The other overlap, you guys, that I was going to say is the trauma. Like I asked you, what did you learn from that experience? And you said, I'm still learning. Yeah. And, there was an 8-year window for me where I had one big trauma, and then almost before I could catch my breath, another big trauma, and then almost before I could catch my breath, another one. Yeah. And I am still unraveling years, over a decade later. I'm still unraveling those traumas. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when you did what some people would call Gestalt therapy, when you went to the cliff and where we actually, because we're taught it's not okay to express anger, it's not okay to express emotions, period. And then so we find ways, breathing techniques or yoga poses or meditation or whatever to help change our neurobiology and change our reactive responses and get more into the parasympathetic and work with our body chemistry. And that's all fine and good. But at the end of the day, what the body really wants is it does want to emote, right? Yes. Energy in motion. So it's not the emotion that's the problem. It's the stagnation of the energy behind it that doesn't get expressed, right? And that's the other overlap I was going to speak of, is that I've more been doing the former and not the latter, not the Gestalt part. And when you were saying, and I feel, I'm even feeling a block in my throat as I say this, I've been feeling lately like, what is it? What am I missing? What am I missing? Because I'm in constant, like on a treasure hunt, and I have all these skills and all this tool and all this knowledge. I feel like something is missing, and it's not something I need to bring in. It's something I need to get out. And when you said that you got all those downloads, when you just finally let it out, I feel I've been constipated for so long, and I just am not experiencing the level of joy that I have capacity for. And so that is such a gift to hear you tell that story, that recount of that story. And there are some clips here I'll be visiting very soon. So thank you.
I'm getting goosebumps talking about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that was something that was gifted to you in this conversation, because water, I've found water is, when I'm around water or in the shower or in the bath or anytime I'm near water, that is when my spirituality opens. Like my father came to me when I was in the shower, which was water, and
which
my
is emotion.
Yeah. So, and my experience at the ocean, screaming out to the ocean, my understanding of the downloads and the gifts that I got was from the knowledge of the ocean. The ocean is wisdom. It holds all the knowledge and all the vibrations of our world in it. And so that's what I accessed when I emptied myself of all the blockages and all the stagnation in my body. And it's like this wisdom of the ocean, and we're 98% or something, 99.8% or something of water. So it was like the vibration connected with me. And when your body holds wisdom, so when you allow it to do its job and you allow it to do what it's meant to do, which I learned through childbirth, and I think that's a wisdom women have through our cycles and through our reproductive systems and through all of that. We understand that our body has a wisdom. Mm-hmm. And so I trusted that this process that I did, just the screaming out to the ocean, I trusted that that's what my body needed in that moment. And so when it happened and the downloads came, it was so shocking to me. It was like, wow, it was all happening for me. And it was all happening despite me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, I live right on the Oregon coast. I grew up on the Oregon coast as well, but I haven't lived in Oregon for many years. I came back a year ago, and I live, like downtown here is a bay.
Wow.
And there's whales right out there, and there's a cliff right out there,
Yeah. Waiting for you.
And yeah, and I, in Buddhism, which I studied Tibetan Buddhism for quite a while, they always refer to that too. They say, ocean of wisdom, ocean of wisdom, ocean of wisdom. So everything you're saying resonates. And the one other overlap, and then I want to come back to you, Juliette. The one other overlap that I remembered and then started to forget again was, your dad, like that when he passed away, this work appeared, the lemonade stand and the raising of the money and the creativity came. And when my father passed away, he sent me one message. I mean, he still visits now and again, but he just sent me one very succinct message when he passed away. And he said, creativity.
All right.
So that was so now I have remembered all the pieces of the overlapping. That was one of them. Yeah. And actually, so we used to talk on the phone a lot, and he'd be like, God, where did you get all this wisdom? Where'd you get all this wisdom? He said, I really wish there was a way for you to share your wisdom with the world.
Yeah, right.
And then I was like, when I started doing this, I was like, I'm doing what my dad was wishing I could do, like writing the blogs and having these and stuff. And I'm like, oh, good. My ancestors' wishes are being fulfilled,
Yeah.
And I'm doing what I love to do that inspires me as well, which is that's what spirit wants us to do, right? So
yes. Yeah.
Juliette, I don't remember specifically. Oh, and I know you have work coming up, so we can't go too far over either. Okay. Well,
but we can come back again another time.
Yes, please. So, Juliette, I don't know how to word this. Let's see. When you were the times that you've been on with Todd, I was just like, oh my word, this woman is just brilliant. And like, and not that I'm, trying to say now, I'm not, you're not on stage here. I'm just saying I really genuinely feel you're brilliant.
Thank you.
But oh, I have a couple questions. Okay. So the other day I was thinking, because now, so you're not in high school anymore. Are you going to college at the moment?
No, I'm saving to travel, but it's something I want to come back to at one point.
Yeah. So my question for you was, now that you are like having to venture out into the world and have jobs and all these kind of adult things, has it how has that been in relation? It's like when you're a little more sheltered, and I mean more sheltered in a way of like nurtured and protected so your creativity can grow. I don't mean shelter as in hiding you from the world.
Yeah.
But now that you're a little less sheltered, is it doing anything to your inherent magic? Are you having to work to protect that and to remember that?
That is actually an amazing
Yes.
question. I ventured out into the world for the first time alone last year, just before the summer started in Australia. So it was around October, November
I was
that I
wondering.
yeah, and that was my first time being out by myself, and I was actually very far away, like from physical home.
Yeah.
And from my family, and it taught me a lot, and it actually brought a lot of my magic back to life, especially around the business, creativity business side, which is, two opposite words, but for me go so like strongly together. Because after high school, my creativity and my motivation for creating my own income, my own, I guess, support in this world diminished a lot. Because I was just like constantly destroyed from it by people, and I was also just so tired from all the work. So I was very much in this space of, I don't know what to do, but being by myself, kind of far away from home, discovering who I am, it reawakened this creativity in me and this longing and need to create my own business. And that's where She's of Love kind of my deep, I don't know, passion for She's of Love grew a lot, as well as a lot of other things in my life. Like I would love to travel around doing market stalls and selling jewelry and my own creative projects. I would love to make money that way. And also just through the podcast as well, like so many projects just come up from it, and so many things that I want to pursue. So I think if anything, coming into adulthood has actually reawakened a lot of things. Being back in Sydney is a bit different. It's been very hard for me to not get stomped out by the city. I get very overwhelmed by the city and by the energy, and even in the workplace, I get very overwhelmed. And I'm a very emotional person. So when you're in the customer service industry and you're very emotional and you're dealing with rude people all the time, it's very draining.
Yeah.
And that does bleed out. Like sometimes I'll need a couple days to recover from work, and then I won't be able to do anything in those 2 days. But then after that, I'll be able to rebuild a little bit and work more on my passion creativity projects. So I don't know. It's very interesting. Right now I'm saving to buy a car, and then once I have a car, I'll be able to travel around Australia. And so that's kind of the goal, and to travel and run a market stall is kind of what I want to do at the moment. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So when I was asking you, are you in college, it wasn't because I think you should or I think you should.
No, I understand
But
that.
do you like, well, we have to wrap it up here. Okay. I don't know. I would like to hear maybe next time we talk what you think the benefits and drawbacks of college are, because I believe that there's both.
I can make it quick. Like
Sure.
I'll make it quick.
Yeah.
My belief around learning and college and university and all that, because learning and school is very different. So I believe personally that the way to go about it for myself, and I'm giving this information for whoever wants to take it, but I think the way to go about it for me is to get real life experience, to travel, to discover who I am, to figure out who I actually am down at the core, to receive the big lessons in life through traveling and experiencing nature and that sort of thing. And from there, once I've discovered who I am, moving forward down a learning path, and whether that is with university, whether maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's some other way of learning, but from there making the commitment to learning in that structural way, because many people do it the opposite way around, and it doesn't lead to many great places. So
so one thing I saw with Juliette growing up is that at around year 5, so how old would you have been in year 5?
I was probably 10.
So around that age,
actually 9,
she really, something dropped in for her where she took control of her learning. She started to take responsibility for how she showed up in her journey with education. And that was something that I was so happy for her that happened, because I knew that was a life skill that she was cultivating that would get her, like it would keep her in stead for the rest of her life. Having that love of learning and taking responsibility for your own learning journey in life, I think is a huge bonus to the individual, because you can extract learning out of everything. It's not just about school, it's everything. And being able to give her the gift of travel, because I used to be a flight attendant, is something that I'm also really grateful for, because next year she's going to go on a massive big trip. And I believe wholeheartedly that travel is one of the greatest learning experiences a person can give themselves. And so, I think that's what her focus is.
I went to my first foreign country when I was 4. I went to New Zealand with my mom, and in my 20s and 30s, I traveled a lot, often alone. And I did 1 year of university in Mexico and learned to speak Spanish fluently, and I still speak it. And I'm all about travel as a university. And I mean, I don't know. Well, I don't know much about the education system or university in Australia. I do know that in the United States, university is a great way to accrue a lot of debt that you might carry around for your life. That's the part that I'm not. And then also, it's like, is it further indoctrination? It depends on the school. It depends on what you study. It depends on how smart you are about the system and what kind of information you're taking in. And so there, we've touched on all those subjects really quickly, but I'm all about you traveling, and I know that just from what little I know of you, whatever you do, whatever you choose, wherever you go, you're going to learn, because it's in your nature. You're curious and you're conscious, and you want to know how things work, and it'll probably never end.
Yes. Yay.
Wow.
You both were so gracious and so kind to let me weave in a few of my own thoughts where I saw the overlap there. It's been fun weaving with you. And I feel like we barely scratched the surface. So in the future, if you would like to come back, I would be more than honored.
I think I invited myself.
What do you mean?
I think I invited myself back on.
Oh, well, I would have invited you anyway.
Yeah, cool.
So thank you both so much. I know you have to go get ready for work, but is there anything in closing that either of you would like to offer the audience, or any wisdom to share, or inspiration, or something else really cool about yourself that you just didn't get to share yet? Or like, is there anything that comes to your heart or mind before we go in closing for either of you to say?
I think just love is
Find the love in your heart.
Is the biggest superpower in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even through the trauma, there's love.
Yeah.
To be found. Yeah.
Now I know we're related.
Yeah.
It's my thing too. I'll share a link with you guys later. I finally created my own little web page
Awesome.
and for merchandise to spread messages. And so far I only have one message on there, but the message says, wherever you stand, fill that place with love. So,
yes.
yeah.
Awesome.
Wow.
Right. Well, speaking of love you guys so much, and don't leave just yet, but we're gonna say goodbye to the audience.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, whether you're
Thank
watching
you for
now
having us.
on the replay. Thank you.
Bye.
We'll bring him back, okay? Don't worry.